I mean, really made a huge.
You're live.
All right, we don't need that.
I don't know how to turn it off, so we do need it. I got it there.
Well, then it's going to be there. Okay, it is 4 o'clock. A quorum is present, so the August 21st meeting of the Board of Health is now open. For public comments, anyone has comments to make that is not on the agenda? And I understand we do have a group here. Helene, would you?
Our heroes have arrived.
Yes.
We would just like to introduce, now that we are a mosquito control project, we've been approved by the state, and this is the group that has been doing the work last year and continuing this year. And Emily, do you want to lead off, or Dan?
Sure. I'm Emily Hibbard. I'm an entomologist with Vector Disease Control and a liaison for VDCI here on Nantucket. We've been subcontracted by the town to do surveillance, treatment, and public education on island. Basically, the program is an integrated program where we're identifying breeding zones of mosquitoes. We're collecting scientific data over the course of the season, and then we're treating in areas when necessary. In our program, we're only using a biological larvicide, which is specific just to mosquitoes. It is classified by the EPA as essentially non-toxic, so it's not harmful to any other wildlife, humans, vegetation, shellfish, or the water. So it's a very safe treatment for mosquitoes, and it's specific to mosquitoes. We've been doing a ton of data collection, like I said, to see what's here, and there's different species of mosquitoes on the island that carry disease. We're identifying those species and then sending them off to be tested for things like West Nile and Eastern equine encephalitis, and making sure that we don't have any hits on Nantucket, which we haven't in the past 2 years that we've been doing testing. So, thank you for listening, all of us.
Thank you.
I actually have a couple of questions.
Please.
Are you here 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 1 day a week, 2 days a week?
I'm a resident here, so I live here.
Okay.
I live here year-round, and Christina is our regional director, and Dan is our national operations manager.
Excellent.
I'm here around the clock.
One other question. What you're using as a larvicide, how does it affect fish?
So it is actually specific. It's a specific bacterium that only affects Diptera larvae. So that is a group of mosquitoes, and then some black flies, which we actually do not have here on Nantucket. So it is specific just to mosquito larvae. Basically, it is put into the water on a corn cob granula, and the granula disperses the bacteria into the water. The mosquitoes ingest it. Other things can ingest it as well, but it only affects mosquito larvae. It just causes an acidic pH in their midgut, and they stop feeding. So they don't actually emerge as an adult mosquito. We stop the problem before they emerge. So instead of using things like adult spraying, where it can affect other insects, we are only targeting just mosquitoes in their breeding habitat.
So this has no effect on the fish populations of ponds?
No effect.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I wanted to get that out to the public because that's been a question.
Sure.
One more question. What about, do we have statistics on the number of mosquitoes over the last, since you've been here, what, 3 years, 2 years?
So this is our second year,
Second year.
and we've been collecting extensive data. I brought, in case anybody's interested after your meeting, I brought just a graph to show this is one area of treatment that we've been doing in Nantucket, and basically it accounts for the number of mosquitoes collected per trap night over the past 2 years. So this first kind of group of points that you see here was our first year of treatment. The second group towards the end here, you can see how much that's dropped down over the course of this year. So we hope by next year you'll see even more of a reduction, and it's just showing this is some of just an example of data from one location. Yeah.
That's great. So,
Yep. And then I also brought, just in case anybody's interested, a collection of mosquitoes, all the different species we have here.
well, I was,
So if anybody's interested.
I was going to suggest we put this in the minutes. I don't think we need to put the mosquitoes in. So if we could have that to go in the minutes, your graph would be very helpful to us.
Yeah, I can email you maybe.
Thank you, that'd be terrific.
Thank you very much.
Just to follow up on that, so is there a graph for each trap or something?
So we
or how-
can generate, we've been collecting data where there's 8 graphs that are set, 8 traps that are set weekly. We account for the number of mosquitoes collected each night in each trap, and I also identify each mosquito to species.
And are the traps in the same location, so they're repetitive in that
Yes.
sense?
And then we set additional traps in places where we have specific requests.
You know, really, Richard, I think it's good information, and maybe we can, do we have a site on our website for the mosquito control district or whatever you guys are? Sure, it might be helpful, then you put the date up there, it's always available,
Yeah.
and people
Yeah,
can
good idea.
pick it up whenever they want, so.
So
Yeah, I
Richard,
can-
you can set that up?
I can talk to administration and see that.
Put that on our, put another little
Yeah.
thing. That'd be terrific.
We
Yeah.
can generate a monthly report. I do this for the DPW. I send Kara a monthly report of all of the surveillance sites, the trapping data, the treatment data, and such. So
Good.
I'll share with you.
I'm Maureen Phillips. I'm on the board of the Nantucket Residents Association, and we were, I think we sponsored the warrant that got behind a grant to start this off. And the whole island was very supportive, so this is just great. And so we have a monthly newsletter that we put out to our people, and I think your graphs would be of great use, and really something that maybe the Civic League might want to have available. That's the association of all the neighborhood associations.
Right.
And so, because obviously not only Nantucket, but that's just wonderful. And I share Richard's concern about fish, because we had a guy a couple of years ago who had he was called Buzz Off, and what he used turned out to be
Detrimental.
detrimental to fish larvae as well.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, and we've gone through all sorts of permitting through the state and through the DPW, and made sure that what we're using is safe, it's been approved,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's
that's-
totally specific to mosquitoes.
Yeah, because
So
our group was
he was
concerned
responsible
about that.
probably for
Yeah.
including them in the plan, just to oversight.
Great, and thank you again.
Yes, and thank you very much. Any other public comments, issues not on the agenda? Well, let us move forward then. Approval, we have July 17th and July 38th minutes. They've been distributed. Comments, additions, subtractions?
Good to go for me?
Hearing none, they're approved by unanimous consent. And Richard, we have a change order, shared system easement.
Yes, we do. As you'll remember, the last meeting, we granted an easement for a specific subdivision, Finback, with regard to access to the leach facility for the, what's the word I want? It's, what's that? Yeah. And this went to DEP after our approval. DEP was a little less than comfortable with the amount of property and the location of property included in the easement portion, so they asked for a change in that, which the owners of the subdivision have granted. DEP has indeed approved this change, and now they are asking us to re-sign that document.
Fine, we will, any questions, comments, objections, then we will go ahead and, you have it here for us?
I
or-
do.
So we will sign that. Charlene, we're ready for our interim report. For those not familiar with our tick-borne disease survey, it's primarily conducted by Nantucket Cottage Hospital with the support of the Board of Health. And over the last 2 years, we've added to that an intern that is to assist in that. And we certainly need to have accurate numbers of tick-borne disease. So if we're going to do anything, we have to have something we can follow. So you're on.
Hi, I'm Charlene Chadwick. I'm the infection control nurse at the hospital. The county pays me to at the hospital, and I do the reporting of all the reportable diseases. Luckily, this summer I've been able to have Leah Pearl helping me, doing actually most of the data entry. Gave the Board of Health graphs here. I yesterday compared the last 3 years, and it's not just about ticks. I do all the reportable diseases like hepatitis, and foodborne illnesses, and the STDs. So I just wanted to show you those because those are also a public health concern.
Yes.
Something we need to think about in the future at some point. Tick-borne diseases, of course, are always the biggest communicable, reportable disease there is. And holds pretty steady. 2013, of course, looks like the numbers were a little bit higher. I think we had a warmer winter in 2012, 2013, so that doesn't surprise me. Year to date, now this MAVEN is a reporting system for the Department of Public Health. And what happens is we draw our labs. The labs are sent to Imagen, and Imagen, when they get a positive lab, automatically sends, it's all by electronic, sends the results to the state. So then I open up MAVEN or data system, which is a state system, or they'll email me and tell me I have something important that I need to report on, and we investigate it. So by investigating it, we'll look at ER records or doctor's office records. Everything's electronic these days. When I started doing this 10 years ago, I used to have to pick up the phone and call the patient, and they would have to tell me what their symptoms were. Luckily, we don't really have to do that too much anymore. And we just go down the symptom list, add the symptoms, add when they were bitten by a tick, and anything else, any other questions. And then the state system is able to record it and put it into a Microsoft Excel sheet, and I can do a graph out of that. So I can look back 5, 6 years if we really wanted to, but it's pretty much the same every year. This MAVEN, the Department of Public Health, only records for Nantucket residents. Doesn't care if the person's from New York or California or New Jersey. Even though they will get lab results from somebody like that's drawn here, they will send it off to their Department of Public Health. And then, like starting now, I'm getting telephone calls from other public health agencies across the country wanting information on the patient, and I'm able to give them that. So you can see down here, Nantucket Cottage Hospital positive labs January 1 through August 20th, 2014. Those are the lab results that we've had so far, whether they're Nantucket, New Jersey, wherever. These are the positive results we've had so far. This is not 100% accurate. Doctors don't always draw labs. They diagnose by rash, by symptoms. The babesiosis, you can do a blood smear and see it on a blood smear, or physicians on Nantucket are comfortable enough, they have the experience enough where they feel the patient really doesn't need a lab result, and they will just treat the patient. So I don't think it will ever be 100%. It's just a snapshot.
But we now can report suspected cases, right?
We can if somebody tells us, yes.
But we capture that.
Who's we?
You.
I capture that if the doctor's office tell me.
Right.
They don't always tell me.
Right. But for the most part, those are included in these numbers too? Or?
Yes.
Yes. That's what's important. As we say, I mean, you don't always need a lab.
You don't always need a lab, but the doctors don't 100% of the time tell me. They're really good in June, the beginning of July, but they're seeing 30 patients a day, just themselves with doctors, and they're not. I asked Dr. Pearl today if she had a running list, and she said no. She knows that she's treating patients and not telling them. So, I mean, that's only one position.
What about our new disease, myomyoti?
That's not really reportable yet in the eyes of the state, even though we are keeping.
But you're keeping.
I've only seen like 2 of those
Yeah,
So,
all right. So when we get, and you do September to September officially, right? That's what we've had in the past years?
well, I do it year round.
Yeah, but I mean, the numbers you were,
Reporting?
last year, I remember they were,
It could have been.
they were
It could have been.
September to September.
But I can pull it off at any time. I can pull it off the state website right now,
Okay.
or whatever date range you want.
We'll go back to that in a minute. And I was just looking here at hepatitis C. Maybe that's something we should be paying attention to?
There's something we should be paying attention to.
I'm just-
It's not just Nantucket, it's Cape Cod, also a big article in the paper recently about
Mhm.
hepatitis C and drug abuse. all that.
Hmm.
It's a problem.
It's one of the issues on my upcoming health officers conference that's gaining a lot of attention.
And it's young people.
Yes. Yes.
Well, maybe that's something we need to put on our work agenda.
Once I get a little more concrete information, yes.
You know, I'd like to do an educational symposium every year. We can think about it for our next symposium.
Sure.
Hepatitis and STDs, right?
Yeah. We haven't we haven't talked about that in a long time. It's kind of slipped away from public health,
Which is too bad.
or at least slipped away from the public.
Yes.
Excuse me, may I just interject something? My husband is Dr. Borst,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
the gastroenterologist on the island, and he sees the hep C patients as part of his practice. You know, they would all funnel to him. But is he, he's done tons
Yep.
of things.
Yep.
But is there a reporting mechanism in place for him to tell somebody when he sees a hep C person?
Yes.
There is, okay, I just want to make sure. But he would be great
It's
for,
the same thing as anytime, a positive lab comes, it goes right to the state. And then I get notified.
Okay, he doesn't have to worry.
He doesn't have to worry about it at all.
Thank you, sorry to.
That's okay.
Then, one more question on the tick-borne disease. So these numbers, 12, say 2012-13, that's for the year as a whole?
That's December, January 1st.
Okay. Because the last numbers I saw were September to September. So I just want to make sure that when I quote numbers,
Okay,
I'm quoting
the calendar.
the,
year.
well,
You never know what people want, because sometimes they want the fiscal year, sometimes they want the calendar year, so it is.
well, when I made my presentation last night, I presented September to September.
Okay.
But
And I can give you that if you want.
no,
Okay.
I just have to be always saying the same thing.
You just say fiscal year or calendar year,
And then,
and you give your report.
this is important.
Okay.
I'm sometimes a little slow. So you still have the numbers of the lab plus the suspected. You have those numbers.
I have some of the suspected numbers.
Yeah, you'll never have all of them.
Right.
And so, in the numbers,
If somebody tells me they have a suspected lab, I report it to Nathan. I do report
good,
it to-
good, because I know the state used,
It's actually easier to do that.
the state now allows that. They used to not count that.
Right.
And that was a
They
big,
want it now.
yeah, good. So these numbers are suspected and confirmed. Great.
That's the goal. We have to run.
So I will still talk, if I have other discussions between now and the end of the year, I'll still use September to September, and then when it comes January, then I'll use the whole year. I know you have nothing to do, but if you could repeat this for some more years back,
Actually, more years back,
you know, maybe,
January.
5 or 6 years.
Actually, it's pretty quick.
Yeah, if you could do, 5 or 6 years. I actually have some numbers from like 2008, and that,
Calendar year or fiscal year?
as long as it's the same. Calendar year,
I think calendar year is better.
It is.
because
The general
January-
public understands the calendar year more than they do
January,
the fiscal year.
we don't see too much in January, February.
no,
March.
they're all
Months,
they're all asleep.
now and in the fall.
Yeah. All right, so if you could repeat this a few years back, and then, actually, don't even have to do that till January. I don't want to make you work twice. And then I can use those numbers going forward, January, I could for a year. And the other thing, I think the board, when we go into the next items we want to tackle, I think we really have to look at hepatitis C. That's quite concerning. How we're going to attack that, I don't know yet, but we'll, education and how we get to the people. Yeah, we would. We'll set in a couple meetings from now, we'll put it on the agenda and try to work through some plans. Okay? Any other comments from the board?
You're doing very well, Mr. Chairman.
One other thing that's in your packet is a
Oh, yes,
the
please,
latest,
please bring that up. That's
indicator.
That's fascinating.
Tick-borne disease in ticks, not humans. This is the program where we're submitting as many as 100 ticks to the state lab, the UMass lab, for diagnostic purposes to determine exactly how much disease is out there in the tick population. Right now, with the information that we have, it seems to be about 25 to 30%, which is, I think it's a figure that's been recognized as relatively accurate. Please note that about half of that are co-infections, where the tick has more than one tick-borne disease. We have 32 on the list. We've only got about 28 that have actually been returned as results to my office, and we've probably got another 10 that are in transit, so we should have more updated numbers next month. And we'll continue with the program until we reach 100 ticks, which will be somewhere in the late fall, early winter.
And actually, the literature suggests there's a great variation year to year, and time to time, and location to location, ranging from 50% down to about 20%, but they seem to all have a regression to a mean of about 30%. So that's about what you'd expect.
As this is a public document, I have redacted the names of the individuals
Yes.
and the locations of the ticks. That's less than important at this point, but it can give us an indicator of the hot spots when we finally review this in its complete.
That will help us in our other things we need to do.
Ventures. Yes.
In our other ventures. But that falls very in line with the published literature, which is very interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Review of recent inspection of Millie's Restaurant, Richard?
Yes. You have numerous documents in your packet. We did get out and re-inspect Millie's Restaurant. It was done on, I believe, perhaps August 11th. Yes, August 11th. Last night we did a seat occupancy count, and the record were front outdoor seating, 49 people seated, eating and drinking. Rear outdoor seating, 30 people seated, eating and drinking. Indoor first floor bar area, 12 people seated and eating. Indoor second floor bar area, 28 people seated, eating and drinking. Indoor second floor area, 47 people seated, eating and drinking. This, unfortunately, does seem to override the 124 that we had required. Also, I guess more pressing, when the inspectors went out back, they found that the grease trap portion of the septic system was literally bubbling at grade and was full and overflowing. When I went out to view this myself, I spoke to the ownership, and they have discontinued the use of an ice machine, which was a water-cooled ice machine, which, like a radiator, moves water through it continually. And we suspect that that water was going into the septic system, because as you move through the pages in your document, the first thing that you will find is an account of the water meter readings for 326 Nantucket Road. As you can see, they are quite substantial. They are allowed 4,980 gallons of black water and gray water going into the septic system. We have to understand that that is not an exact figure. coming through the water meter readings, they shouldn't necessarily equal out. There are probably a few hundred gallons utilized as pump out, as wash down water that never reaches the septic system and things of that nature. And as you can see over the weekend, they reached 16,900 gallons, 12,125 gallons. This is substantial excess of what they're allowed on what they were allowed on the property. However, following this information, the revelation came with regard to the ice machine. Now, the second page notes after removal of water-cooled ice machine, and perhaps a little more diligence on the owner's part. And you can see that over those periods of time, they are substantially down. They went from 12,125 on a Sunday, disconnected the machine, and immediately went to 4,517, then 6,000, 7,000. Probably within approvable limits with regard to that septic system right now. Certainly over a bit, but much better than 12 and 16,000 gallons. So I commend them for discontinuing use of that machine and perhaps coming down to a reasonable number here. We did compare that food service establishment with what we felt were two other establishments in town offering the same scenario, basically the same seating, indoor and outdoor. One was the Tavern, and as you can see by the next chart, and the other one was Crew in the following chart. They are certainly in line with the Tavern and below the usage of what Crew is using. So I think right now that ice machine was a substantial problem. As I do not wish to involve myself with any form of violation of the open meeting law, I have included emails where we discuss this as part of the public packet here. My recommendations with regard to this are still things that I'm concerned with. This was written prior to the discontinued use of the ice machine, but I would like to go through them. First of all, I would like the owners to immediately cap and decommission the existing well on the property as it is located within the required setback as defined in the Nantucket regulations and it should not be used for any purpose. It's too close to the septic system.
Was it being used for any purpose?
I don't know that, but I would like to have it capped. Secondly, enter into a contractual agreement with a pumping service to have all tanks pumped, and I noted every 5 days. I think I'm okay with every 7 days, 7 or 8 days, but I think it needs to happen for the remainder of the season. I'd like them to hire an engineer or qualified pumping inspector to ascertain in writing to this office that there are no leaks to any portion of the water delivery system to the property. I think this can only benefit them. I suspect there aren't, but I think we need to provide that. And contract an engineering and septic design firm to design a grease trap and septic tank of 3,000 gallons minimum to be installed prior to the 2015 summer season. So this is work that could occur over the winter. But I think it's needed simply because of the flows. Obviously, the flows exceed the septic system, and because of that, they exceed the capacities of the tanks also, and I think the tanks need to be enlarged.
What are the tanks at now?
1,500 gallons.
Does the grease trap have a gallonage too, or is that?
The grease trap is sized by the plumbing department and was sized for 124 seats in that particular establishment. And there is a filter on that. And by its own nature, grease accumulates at the filter. That filter clogs quite frequently and very quickly, certainly adding to the backup issue we had with the grease trap. I don't know that there's any way to get around that. That needs further review, perhaps by the engineering firm that installed the system or another engineering firm that the ownership chooses. But we do need larger tanks back there. And I think that will certainly placate the flooding of the tanks.
Placate in the sense if you have a bigger tank, there's more.
There's more room in the tank for more gallonage and a greater settling time. And I think that's the important factor, is the greater settling time.
Other comments?
issues with Millie's on these matters?
I'm going to have to recuse myself because I'm currently doing some work for the pumping of the.
I guess we won't hear from you then.
Yeah, unless you want to ask me a question about something.
No,
Yeah.
just best you just not participate. The other question is, though, these all seem reasonable, but we still have the issue of more than 124 people.
Yeah, and with regard to that, I think it's extremely important that the Board of Health sit with the ownership and perhaps the staff of the planning department or members of the planning board to define a specific, rigid seating program for this restaurant, which will not contain over 124 allowable seatings. I think that needs to occur in the fall. I think with what's come from the planning department, planning board, and the health department, I think we need to sit down and as a group try to come up with a reasonable approach to the seating in the food service establishment that will hold the establishment to 124 seats.
That seems reasonable for us to discuss, and I think we do not want to move into next season having Millie's on the agenda more than 0.
No, I agree. I think that we can dispatch this
I just
issue
am concerned
this
that we
winter.
made a big point at the last meeting about 124 seats, and I sort of put off the argument about how many people can sit on a seat and said, we'll make it simple, and they had a lot more than 124 seats, and that bothers me.
Well, I think that argument may need to come back,
So, I mean,
that concern, rather.
so if we add up the count from the other sheet is whatever it is.
We're well over 124
Yeah.
that particular night.
So is this the sort of same old debate, some are standing up at tables, or what's, are we going to just let it go until the fall? Or maybe it's going on every night? I mean, you might as well clarify it right
Yes.
now.
Oh, thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. Stephen Cohen, I'm representing Millie's this evening. My client is a much more responsible and compliant participant than the record that's been presented would suggest, and that the emails that are in the records would suggest. I'd like to offer a more balanced version of the record. Millie's has 124 seats inside and the outside seating, and understands the strict rule that they're only allowed to seat 124 people. The system that was put in place after the Board of Health hearing, in order to accomplish that, was to buy a new software system where the hostesses would seat people, and that would be counted into the system, and then when a check is dropped, they would be taken off. So you have people being sat, counted, people getting their check, they come off, and that can be reset. Those seats can then be reset. Mm-hmm. That system may have a slight flaw in that people might linger. There might be some small overlap, but I think I don't know how we couldn't go around and count every head every time. But I think that system is an extremely efficient and objective way of doing it, and we're certainly open to exploring making it tighter or working on fine-tuning it. But I think that it can and should work for the most part. What we also see out at Millie's is that Millie's is essentially the town hall and the general store of Nantucket. People come there a lot for all kinds of things. People come from the beach to use the bathroom. It's essentially the public bathroom out there. There are people who just come to hang out there. They go and buy something at the store, and then they come and sit down. And there's not a lot of control, and the management doesn't want to be turning away everybody and saying, "Oh, you didn't buy fish tacos. You got to get lost." But we need to also be compliant with the rules, and we recognize that. And I think that what's important to look at in these numbers is that night there was a 2-hour wait at Millie's, and there were over 40 seats not being used. If Millie's wanted to just stack them and pack them and rack them, and those seats would have been filled. The people who were on the ground that night were working a system that they thought worked and were not using available seats in both outside and inside seating because they thought they were following the rules. We can work on making it better, I think. But this idea that they were just, trying to fill every seat, they wouldn't have had a 2-hour wait. They wouldn't have had all these people that are noted as standing around. So that's one issue, is that it is not the scofflaw that's painted in just those numbers. I think there's two sides to that. We do think that working on this in October with the planning board, where Millie's is supposed to go back to the planning board for an assessment in October, that having a joint meeting with staff and the Board of Health to further refine this is a good idea, is a productive idea, and is something that we have no problem participating in. In terms of the mitigation or improvements that the commissioner has suggested, the 4 that he went through, 2 of them seem like there's no problem. The pumping once a week, I think during the high season of July and August, or July through Labor Day, is not a problem. That's something that we can arrange for. It is, I think, doing it 7 days a week, every 7 days instead of every 5 days, is just logistically more viable for an operator. Trying to get them on a 5-day cycle is probably difficult. Having them come every Wednesday or something is probably more realistic. But the pumping is no problem, and of course the pumping is what protects the harbor because it's emptying out the system. Hiring an engineer to make sure there's no leaks, that's something that's beneficial to the client and to the environment. That's something that we can do. The other 2 we're not against, but we're not sure that they're the right solution. The well, we don't necessarily see the benefit of capping the well. We have to check into it, but we think that the well is hooked up to the fire suppression system and not to the what would essentially be the domestic water. So if it's not feeding into the system, it shouldn't be capped. If it is, I think what we want to do is revisit that after we figure out what that well is currently hooked up to. Because if it's just the fire suppression system, I don't know that it makes sense to cap it. So we'd like to explore that technically before we agree to it. On the grease trap and larger tank, I talked with our engineer about it, and I guess what we don't see necessarily is the advantage or the benefit of doing that. It's quite costly, but I don't know that it provides any advantage. We think that the problem with the system was that there was too much water coming into it, so it wasn't allowing for enough settling. By essentially unplugging that water-cooled ice machine, that water flow dropped 2/3. So we don't know that it's necessary anymore. That said, what we'd suggest is that there be some continued monitoring, because this flowage rate is something that we can continually monitor. And if it looks like that the system, that there's an actual benefit to upgrading the system, we would like to come back to it. But just to do it doesn't necessarily make sense. Again, I think that's something that we could put off and explore. And if it seems like there would be an environmental benefit to doing it, or it would add time to the system, then that's something we could do. But I think if taking the ice machine offline has already handled the problem, it's just wasting time and money. So I think that's where we are on those issues, that they are perhaps a little premature or not necessarily made with all the information, but there's something that we should look at. But the other 2, the pumping and the leak inspection, is something we could readily agree to. So I think that's where we are on this, that my client wants to be a good neighbor, my client wants to be a profitable business, and my client in the community, and my client wants to be environmentally sensitive. And we think that we have a system that is mostly there and could be there, could be potentially done a little better. But I think, getting into October is probably the better way to do that, or having that meeting in October.
I certainly appreciate Council's comment. As far as the tanks are concerned, I think it's appropriate to look at what the flows are going to be and what the condition of the tanks are going to be over the next month or 2 while you're open. And I think it's probably a discussion-oriented item for the fall.
Sure.
I'm still pretty convinced that we do need larger tanks there simply for the settling factor. but we can talk about that in the fall. It still doesn't negate the simple fact that at our first meeting, it became very obvious through planning board discussion that 55 seats were allowed outside with 69 inside if those 55 seats were taken up. We found 79 seats outside and 87 seats inside being utilized for 166 people. So this still doesn't get us around the seating issue, which we're going to have to discuss. And I think it's incumbent upon me to tell you that the planning board may offer recommendations regarding to seating and the number of seats. But that number is solely in control with the health department, as this is a in-ground septic system, and that system dictates exactly how many seats can be in that food service establishment at any one time, either on its premise or inside the building. And that's something that that needs to be explored a little bit more and needs some discussion with comment from planning, and the Board of Health will make the decision as to how many seats and what configuration belong inside that food service establishment. My concern with the last vote of the board was we did not consider those individuals eating at the bar, but more importantly, at the finger bars in there. There was substantial food being served at the finger bars when my inspectors were there, and they did not count those individuals. So this 166 is a minimum number of people eating at that point in that food service establishment.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Richard.
Well, just to make sure I understand that, I hear Steve, and we're clocking them in and clocking them out, and working on 124, but was that system not in effect this night if you have 166, or are you saying the 166 was wrong? I'm not quite putting these two together, Steve.
Yeah, I think that part of it, that I don't know exactly, but this is what I think. Part of it is I'm not entirely sure if some of the play seating, the courtesy seating that's not dining seating, is counted or not. I'm also not sure
in the 166.
In the 166, and I'm not sure. The count, according to the timesheet that was submitted, was done over a 45-minute period, so I don't know how static it was. In 45 minutes, there's a lot of turnover in that restaurant, and they're seating people and dropping checks. It's entirely possible there's a party of 12 that gets a table, gets a check or gets seated. I don't know exactly, but I think it's a combination of the system that we have might have some allowance for people not to be kicked out of the restaurant quite yet, but also over time that there are people who we're counting as being out or we're seating, but if you walk around and keep walking around, you're going to find tables full and tables empty, but it's not a static shot over that 1 hour period where the inspection was done. So I don't know exactly, but I think that it is probably likely that there was some overage that's less than what's presented, but not but I don't know exactly.
Well, go ahead, Richard, then I'll have a comment.
This
and we'll
number
wrap up.
was 166, and it was counted by 2 individuals rather quickly. There was not a lot of table movement. And when asked, the individual who at that point were using a hand clicker to click people in and out had a figure of 110 on that hand clicker. So it was substantially off from what was actually found in the food service establishment.
No, go ahead.
Just to follow up, do you do, I would assume it wouldn't be very hard for Millie's to walk around and do their own count and see if your system is close to working towards reality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like a certification, and I think you would certify to the Board of Health that, I promise there are no more than 124 people in there eating and sitting down and being served.
Yeah.
Scout's honor.
And
that's pretty simple stuff.
I think that what Millie's really wants is to not have this continue.
Right.
And the best way for us to do that is to be responsible about it. And I know that management has been discussing the best way to make sure that these numbers are good. And I think that we will have better numbers in the future, more accurate, based on controls that are being put in place.
So the only way, it's like trust and verify, right?
That's right.
So if we have to send out someone once a week for the next couple of weeks because you're not you're doing your system, and your system doesn't seem to correspond to our system, so there's a disconnect, Steve.
Yeah, what I think we're going to have is more verification on our own end, that what we think is happening is actually happening.
That's what I'm looking for the Scouts honor, so
Yeah.
hopefully then, but we've got to verify that. And I think that's our job.
Sure.
Yes, and I think we will continue to check. I mean, you said your desire is not to have this continue. It's certainly not my desire to have this continue. I like things off agendas as quickly, but I have a sense this is going to remain a bit. And I am concerned because it was 124, and as I said before, my concern too is that's just an algorithm out of Title V. It doesn't really account for the fact that you might have 300 people there. So we can't fix Title V, so you have to do a better job, period.
Yeah.
And you may have to just walk around and count, and if people are lingering, you just don't have them sit down. I'm sure I would not like to run a restaurant that way personally, but you happen to be an environmentally sensitive area, and so that's what we have to do.
Yeah, and this is a conversation that I've had with my client that Title V essentially makes no sense. There are lots of ways where there's a windfall to my client and lots of ways where there's an unreasonable burden to my client. And I think that's true for all the restaurants here. And we're just sort of stuck with it. But at the same time, we need a system that allows you to feel comfortable that the right number is being hit on a regular basis and that there's not an environmental impact that is going to be in place, both regulations and actual impact. And I think we will have better information and better systems in place now that we've had. We've seen sort of. I mean, this is we just had this meeting a couple of weeks ago, so we're still working through making it work. And I think that what you'll see is improvements.
No, I think it's great that you're going to pump your system out once a week.
Yeah.
And I think when you have your engineer looking at the leaks, you can look into this issue of the well and the trap, and then get back to Richard on that.
I think that's the plan, if that's acceptable.
Are you comfortable, Richard?
And I'm comfortable with that, yes. That was my proposal. I will say that I think it's probably at this point, with the comments being heard here, that perhaps to assist us when we have the conversation with managers after the season's over, I think for that particular afternoon, I'd like to have the Cape and Islands rep for DEP here also to at least help us through the calculations associated with the 35 gallons per day. I think that.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and it'll help me understand this better, because you could almost say if we had an accurate algorithm with a number of people actually, as you say, coming and going and visiting, you might actually be allowed 2 seats. I mean, given the location of your restaurant. So we have to kind of work through that.
Right. I understand the board is dealing with both the regulation and the public health issues behind it, and we respect that.
That's our first concern, public health. And I'm sure we will continue to follow this.
All right. Well, thank you. We will implement the pumping immediately, and we'll engage the engineer to do the leak inspection and to look at the well and the grease trap and the capacity issue, and we'll report back on that.
Right, and if your client and Richard can't come to a resolution about those other issues, then it can come back here. But otherwise, I'm just happy letting Richard and you work.
I think we can agree that the interim measures are very agreeable to all of us, and I'm very interested to try to work with you on the well situation.
Okay. Yeah. We will. We'll if Richard's okay with it, he'll give you a report, and we'll call it a day. And if he's not, then we'll come back.
All I want from Richard is you can give us a report. Maybe I won't see you again, except in the supermarket.
Yeah. I'll see you at town meeting. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
you. Richard, you have on here tobacco cigarette use on town beaches?
Yes, I would segue to Mr. Atherton at this point. This is something he requested be put on the agenda.
Well, I think I brought up, 2 or 3 meetings ago?
Yes, you did.
And I asked the board's thoughts on the issue, and my recollection is the board was not putting words in your mouth, receptive. Is that the case or not? Or are you indifferent? I brought it up to the Board of Selectmen, and I would say, again, it wasn't for a vote, just to get a sense for the board. I think they all recognize it might be a helpful thing to do, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a kind of show me the data kind of guy, and I think even the information on secondhand smoke is probably convincing, but I don't know on the beach if it's a health issue or a quality of life issue. That's where I'm thinking right now.
Do we know what other resort areas are doing, like
Well, I brought
Martha's
it up
Vineyard or the
because a
Cape?
number of Cape towns, I don't know the number, let's guess 6 or something like that, we can get an actual count, have implemented such rules and regulations. I haven't looked beyond that, so I don't know the answer. I think it's clear in my own mind that smoking is not a good thing, period. So if it helps in that sense to limit people's geographic use of the product, I generally think it's a step in the right direction, but I'm not a data guy in that regard, Malcolm. And I also recognize there's a sort of another issue, which is a sidebar, so not necessarily a Board of Health issue, but hopefully it helps get cigarette butts off the beach. And I want to be very practical. That's a side effect I think benefits us all.
I agree. So what I would suggest is if Richard could find the supporting document of what the other towns did.
Just recently, one has come across my desk. I have not had a chance to review it yet, but I will see to it that you all get copies. I will also contact all those beaches that have enacted this form of legislation on the Cape and in the Boston area. There are 2 in the Boston area. And get copies of their regulatory authority and the regulations that they've written concerning this, and any backup information that they have.
That would be helpful. And then if I can look at that and I get a sense we're dealing with a public health issue, then I think we can bring it here. If it's not a public, I don't want the Board of Health to become a separate entity on the island, and it has to be in the right place, whether we're take over the Board of Selectmen's job or the planning job back there. So let us.
But I agree. I think
Yeah.
getting the data is part of what we need to do.
Let's do that.
Move forward or not.
Yes, that's what we'll do. Budget discussions. Richard. Well, what Richard and I want to do is we want to get a decent budget submitted because we have struggled at times because we don't have a budget. Now, the health department has a budget, and there's things that we'd like to do through the department and ourselves. So we're starting to work on a budget. The issue, though, is that when is these due? First drafts? Leslie, budgets due?
Well, I'm not sure an exact date. I didn't really come here to speak on this.
Well, you're here, so.
I mean, everything starts building up for town meeting in October, November. So the sooner that you can, put some proposal together, the better. But through the plus budget, I mean, we have professional service line items, we have travel budgets, we have everything to cover, sort of the general day-to-day expenses of the Board of Health. But we need to know what those items are anticipated to be, estimated costs.
Yes.
And if there's anything really out of the ordinary, then we can put in for
Right.
additional funds.
So you would like something by September?
Yes, September would be great.
Like, if we have our meeting the 3rd Thursday in September, is that soon enough, or?
That would be just fine.
Okay, good, because what I was afraid of is I didn't want just Richard and I to do this on our own. I wanted the whole board to see it. So what we will do is we will present to the board a draft budget on our 3rd Thursday in September, and then after that discussion, we'll submit it on to you. How's that sound?
That sounds great. But just so everyone understands, the Board of Health, as far as the health staff and those professional services, they are part of the larger plus budget.
I know that. I just want a little chunk that I know that we can spend, and not always have to go begging at somebody's door. All right, thank you. Then that will be on September's agenda, and Richard and I had one discussion. We have to have several more. We have some thoughts, and we just have to get them focused. Director's report?
It's quite simple. It's been an extremely busy summer. Again, human habitation issues seem to be plaguing us as we move through the summer. We will continue to do inspections as they come in. We are backlogged by 3 inspections at this point, which will be happening next week.
Those are of call-in reports?
Yes,
Where they
call-in
indicate
complaints,
there's a
yes,
violation?
yes. We're trying very hard to make sure that the individuals not only call in, but they come in and fill out an actual complaint form at this point. I think that's as important as anything, and at that point, we visit the property and ascertain if there is an issue, contact the owner prior to visiting the property, and we have just gone through a planning and land use sponsored few-hour seminar with council, outlining and refreshing our memories with regard to processes taken with regard to this sort of issue. So we are moving on these things, and
Follow up if I might.
Go right ahead,
So
please.
if they don't physically come in the office, then no action would be taken?
that's not correct. We
I just want
must.
to hear what you were saying. So I can-
We must, by Massachusetts general law, respond to any telephonic anonymous complaint or a written complaint. We like the written complaints because we have a paperwork trail document associated with it. But if that doesn't happen, then we still have to go out to the property not knowing who the complainant was. And in many times, these are not necessarily defined public health issues.
Yeah, they could be a mistake.
They could be a
an error.
mistake,
I understand
yes,
that. I just
yes.
wanted to know what the process was.
That's what the process is.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Sure, go right ahead.
Are we going to have a comment period? I wanted to make a comment about the Millie's issue and kind of zoomed on.
Well, we kind of went through that, so it's past the agenda. It's whatever you can say what you want, but it's not going to change what we've done.
Oh, no,
So why don't we just postpone that? You know, unless go ahead, quickly.
Okay. Because I'm representing the community.
We have plenty of time.
Okay.
I don't want to shut anyone
I
out.
will do this quickly. Maureen Phillips, representing the Nantucket Residents Association. I am not reassured when I heard council talking about, well, I'm not sure about the 162, and I don't know, and da-da-da-da-da, and, you know, how could that be? And we've got this computer software system to do all this. And it's off by, you've got a hand clicker that's 110, you've got a count done by Richard's people that's 162. Those are big numbers to be off. And it makes our organization extremely nervous about Millie's really meaning that they want to be a good neighbor. The grease thing, which Richard's very concerned about. Well, maybe we'll do it, maybe they'll not. You know, there's not, agreement to take these recommendations. And the finger bars are something that really bothers us. Being a lawyer, there's a concept known as you can have a constructive eviction, say. A landlord makes conditions so awful in somebody's apartment they have to leave. Now, did the landlord evict them? No. But in the law, that's known as a constructive eviction. I think finger bars where food and drink are being served is constructive seating.
Right, well,
And I think that's a very important point that I wanted to make.
Right.
And
Real quick now.
and that calling Title V an unreasonable burden, to me, shows that the true wish to be a neighbor and to be a good neighbor to the Nantucket watershed has not been shown by these people, and verification is going to be, in our view, extremely important.
Well, we will continue to file this, and as you heard, we have plans.
Okay.
Just to follow up, and I'm sort of serious about a self-policing report. So, one thing to think about, Malcolm, is to ask Richard to prepare a document that says, each night, to the best of our ability, we never seated more than 124 people. Scouts honor signed a form. And I say Scouts honor, but you get the idea. And I think we ought to, on that form, make clear whether that includes the finger bars or not. So there's no more fuss or muss about that. It's a fact. And they can certify that they are in compliance. And I think that's not unreasonable given the expectations, or given the few reports we have, which clearly are in excess of that number, to ask them to do that. And then we still should send an inspector out and see if those things are validated. Is that unreasonable?
No. The finger bars really are the crux of some of the issue here, in that seating is simply seating. It's an individual sitting in a chair eating. The finger bars, by Board of Health edict of the last meeting, are non-issue. We can't count those.
So just to be clear, the 166 people were sitting in seats.
We're sitting in
Yes,
seats.
that's correct.
Well, I understand you check in, you check out, but a variation of a 10% or whatever, but it's not a variation of 40 people, so I don't accept that. So I'm looking for some kind of indication, and Mr. Chairman, I think that's reasonable to ask for, because there's been enough evidence that things aren't always quite what they seem to be.
Well, I'm concerned about what the board would like for an inspection schedule on our part.
That's a different issue. I think I'm just talking about a weekly report where they certify they're in compliance. What's wrong with that?
Other comments? Elaine?
I don't know how they said they had 110 the other night, and
So it's easy to certify.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
but there were 166 when they said there were 110.
But my problem with that is to ascertain if that is correct. We'd have to send somebody out there every night, and I don't know that I want to do that.
But the point is then, they're making an affirmative statement, Richard. I
Okay.
think that means a great deal.
Okay.
And maybe you all say it
No.
doesn't matter, but I do. I think
We just have to be careful, because then we're going to start getting into what are the seats again. I don't want to start that conversation again.
whatever.
Because we will end up forever having discussions about what is a seat and not a seat.
So look, maybe what's happening, what we ought to understand is, if you're clicking a guy who's having an ice cream cone that came over from the market, and he's sitting at a picnic table. I mean, I don't know what's going on. So we need some way to get at that. Otherwise, the residents in Nantucket are going to all continue. I mean, I get phone calls as a Board of Selectmen member. Hey, Mr. Atherton, what's going on? So I'm looking for a
Okay.
way to have somebody say they're doing what they're supposed to do. And I don't know how, I'm not looking for an inspection every night, Richard. That's their job, to self-inspect first of all. And they can write it down.
Well, they said they would follow it, so we can do that. We can ask them to certify that at any given time during the night, they had not more than 124 seats taken care of.
Okay.
Does anyone object to that? I think that's an excellent suggestion. Thank you. I'm sorry I passed it by when you first brought it up.
That's all right. I just, again, I think we have an affirmative responsibility to.
Absolutely.
That's the first step. And then we have periodic inspections, as we would in any establishment.
Yes.
And whatever inspection protocol the administrator wants to adopt, he adopts. So I'm not saying anything more or less than your normal course of business.
So you can prepare that if you'd like me to sign it, or I'll be glad to
Okay.
send a little note.
Okay.
How's that? Okay? Anything else, Richard?
No.
Any other concerns of the board?
No, I just have some educational materials that the mosquito control group has put together, and they're excellent, so if anybody wants to see them, pass them on.
All right, one other topic relating back to ticks that we talked about in the past. I was brought up again last night, and that's the concept of helping hunters get associated with homeowners for permission on their property. And we discussed that. Perhaps someone in your office could help that at one time, and it kind of fell away.
It did. At this point right now, I do not have the staff to carry that through. I just don't. It's not more than we can deal with right now.
No, I understand that. I think we ought to think about some other way to get at this. Maybe it's through the Civic League or some mechanism to at least, it's like getting people to have a more, I don't know, positive response. You know what I mean? That we've contacted the Tom Nevers folks just to pick the area by random. and maybe the local two groups out there could actually do that. So maybe we have to find a way to contact them through the city. I don't know of any other way.
Well, I'll talk to the Tom Nevers Association.
Because I know that's one that's always comes up.
Yeah.
I will talk to them. And then you will probably see in our next fiscal year budget someone more focused on that kind of activity.
That would be excellent. Good luck.
It's important.
It is.
Any other comments from the board? And hearing no comments and any objections to ending our meeting, so be it. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all very much. Who has that signed document?
I do.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Is that for feedback?
Yes. Now I get to go back over and listen to Leslie chew me out.